The billionaire's jaw dropped when the little delivery girl looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Daddy, is that really you?" But what she revealed next left him speechless and changed both their lives forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Marcus Wellington stood in the marble-floored foyer of his Beverly Hills mansion, adjusting his custom Armani tie one final time before the evening's board meeting. At 30 years old, he had built Wellington Technologies into a billion-dollar empire. But tonight felt different. Something in the air seemed electric with possibility, or perhaps danger. The golden California sunset filtered through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across his minimalist living space. Everything in Marcus's life was precisely ordered, calculated, and controlled. He thrived on predictability, on knowing exactly what each day would bring. That's when the doorbell rang. Marcus frowned. His security team never allowed unannounced visitors, especially not at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had left hours ago, and he wasn't expecting any deliveries. The smart home system showed a small figure on the front porch, impossibly small. He opened the heavy oak door and looked down to find a tiny girl, no more than 7 years old, wearing a faded pink jacket that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she clutched a thermal delivery bag that seemed almost as big as she was. Her sneakers were worn at the toes, but her eyes, those striking green eyes, sparkled with determination that seemed far beyond her years. "Food delivery for Mr. Wellington," she announced, with the professionalism of someone 3 times her age, then paused, studying his face intently. Something shifted in her expression, a recognition that made Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. "I think there's been a mistake," Marcus began, but the words died in his throat as the little girl's face broke into the most radiant smile he had ever seen. "Daddy!" The word hung in the air between them like a thunderclap. Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. His carefully constructed reality cracked down the middle as he stared into eyes that suddenly seemed hauntingly familiar. "What did you just call me?" The girl, this impossible, beautiful child, reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. Her small hands trembled slightly as she held it up to him. "Mama showed me this picture before she went to heaven. She said you were my daddy and that someday I'd find you." Marcus took the photograph with hands that felt disconnected from his body. The image was creased and faded, but unmistakably real. Himself, 8 years younger, arm wrapped around a woman with the same green eyes as the child standing before him, Sarah. Sweet, beautiful Sarah, whom he had loved with all the passion his 22-year-old heart could muster before fear and ambition had driven him away. "Her name was Sarah Mitchell," the little girl whispered as if reading his thoughts. "She told me to be brave and find you if anything ever happened to her. I'm Emma Mitchell, and I've been looking for you for so long, Daddy." The thermal bag slipped from Emma's small hands and hit the marble floor with a soft thud, but neither of them noticed. Marcus stared at this child, his child, standing on his doorstep like a miracle wrapped in poverty and hope. But as the initial shock began to wear off, one terrible question burned in his mind. If Sarah was gone, and this little girl was out here delivering food at night, alone. "Emma," he whispered, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "Where have you been living?" Emma's small hand slipped into Marcus's as naturally as breathing, and in that moment, his billion-dollar empire felt insignificant compared to the trust of this tiny person calling him Daddy. "I live with Grandma Rose in East L.A., Emma said, her voice growing smaller. "She's been taking care of me since Mama died last year, but she's really sick now. She can't work anymore, and we don't have money for her medicine." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. East L.A., a world away from his Beverly Hills mansion, a place where children worked instead of played, where grandmothers chose between medication and meals. "That's why I deliver food every night after school," Emma continued matter-of-factly, as if 7-year-olds working to support their families was the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Rodriguez at the restaurant lets me help, and I get to keep some of the tips, but it's not enough for Grandma's breathing medicine." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he'd been building his tech empire, attending galas and collecting rare art, his daughter, had been struggling to survive just 30 miles away. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion he'd forgotten how to feel, "why didn't you try to find me sooner?" Her green eyes, so much like Sarah's, filled with tears. "Mama made me promise not to bother you unless something really bad happened. She said you were important and busy and that you probably forgot about us. But when Grandma started turning blue when she coughed, I knew it was really bad." Marcus pulled Emma into his arms, this brave little warrior who had been carrying the weight of the world on shoulders that should have known only the burden of a backpack full of homework. The expensive fabric of his suit absorbed her tears as years of carefully constructed emotional walls crumbled around him. "You're never bothering me," he whispered into her hair. "Never. And I never forgot about your mama, Emma. I was just scared and stupid." As he held his daughter for the first time, Marcus made a silent vow. He would move heaven and earth to make up for the 7 years he'd lost, starting with saving the grandmother who had raised his child when he wasn't there to do it himself. But first, he needed to meet Rose Mitchell, and he had a feeling that conversation would change everything he thought he knew about the kind of man he'd become. The drive through East LA felt like traveling to another planet. Marcus's Tesla moved silently through streets lined with check-cashing stores, taco trucks, and apartments with bars on the windows. Emma sat beside him in the passenger seat, giving directions with the confidence of someone who had walked these streets countless times alone. "Turn left at the corner with the broken streetlight," she said, pointing toward a narrow street lined with aging apartment buildings. "Grandma Rose always waits up for me, even when she's too tired to stand." Marcus parked outside a building that had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, and the security gate hung slightly askew, but Emma bounded out of the car with the excitement of a child coming home. "Grandma! Grandma Rose!" Emma called as they climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. "I found him! I found my daddy!" The door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her 70s who moved with obvious difficulty. Rose Mitchell had Emma's same determined green eyes, but they were now clouded with illness and exhaustion. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her obvious poverty, she wore a clean house dress and had maintained her dignity with the grace of someone who had weathered many storms. "Emma Louise Mitchell," Rose said, her voice carrying both relief and gentle scolding. "You've been gone for 3 hours. I was worried sick." Then her eyes found Marcus, and the color drained from her weathered face. "You," she whispered, gripping the doorframe for support. "You're Sarah's Marcus." The weight of recognition, of judgment, of years of absence hung heavy in the narrow hallway. Marcus had faced hostile board meetings, aggressive competitors and ruthless investors, but nothing had prepared him for the quiet assessment in this grandmother's eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus began, but Rose held up a trembling hand. "Rose," she corrected, then looked down at Emma with infinite tenderness. "Baby girl, why don't you show your father your drawings while I make some tea?" As Emma tugged Marcus into the tiny but spotlessly clean apartment, he caught glimpses of a life lived with love, despite hardship. Emma's school artwork covered the refrigerator, library books were stacked neatly on a makeshift table, and despite the thrift store furniture, everything spoke of care and devotion. "Grandma Rose taught me to read before I started school," Emma chattered, pulling out a shoebox full of crayon drawings. And she makes the best pancakes in the whole world, even though we can only have them on special days now. Marcus studied the drawings, stick figures of a little girl, an older woman, and in many of them a tall man labelled Daddy, standing slightly apart from the others. His daughter had been drawing him into her life for years, imagining a father who had never bothered to exist for her. When Rose returned with tea in mismatched cups, Marcus saw the oxygen tank tucked discreetly behind her chair and heard the slight wheeze in her breathing. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cup, "for taking care of her, for loving her when I wasn't here to do it." Rose's smile was sad but kind. "Emma is the light of my life, Mr. Wellington, but I'm not going to live forever, and that child needs her father." The truth hung in the room like a challenge, and Marcus realized that earning Emma's love would be only the beginning. He had to prove himself worthy of the trust this remarkable woman had placed in him. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Rose's apartment with 2 suitcases of cash, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. He had solutions for everything: private doctors for Rose, a new apartment in a better neighborhood, the best private schools for Emma. Money, he had learned, could fix most problems. He was wrong. "Mr. Wellington," Rose said gently, closing the suitcase he had opened on her kitchen table, "this is very generous, but we can't accept charity from someone who just discovered Emma exists." Marcus felt his first taste of real frustration since childhood. "It's not charity. She's my daughter. Let me take care of you both." "Emma," Rose called, "come sit with us for a minute." Emma appeared from her bedroom, wearing her school uniform, a carefully maintained white shirt and navy skirt that had probably been purchased second-hand but pressed with pride. "Your father wants to help us," Rose explained, "but I need you to understand something very important. Money doesn't make someone a parent. Being there every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, that's what makes a family." Emma looked between them with the wisdom of a child who had grown up too fast. "Are you going to stay this time, Daddy, even when it gets boring or scary?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his world, when things got difficult, he hired someone else to handle them. When relationships became complicated, he walked away. He had walked away from Sarah when she needed him most, and now his 7-year-old daughter was asking him to prove he wouldn't do the same to her. "I want to stay," he said honestly, "but I don't know how to be a father, Emma. I don't know how to be the kind of man who deserves a family like you and Grandma Rose." The Rose's expression softened slightly. "The fact that you know that is a good start." "Can you teach me?" Marcus asked, the words foreign in his mouth. Marcus Wellington, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was asking a sick grandmother in East LA to teach him how to be human. "Being a parent isn't something you learn in a day," Rose said, beginning to cough, a harsh, rattling sound that made Emma immediately move to rub her grandmother's back. "But if you're serious about being in Emma's life, really in it, then you start with the small things." "Like what?" "Like picking her up from school tomorrow. Like learning what her favorite subject is. Like being here when she's scared at night, not just when it's convenient for you." Marcus watched Emma comfort her grandmother with practiced ease. This little girl who had been forced to grow up too quickly and made a decision that would either redeem him or destroy the careful life he had built. "I'll take a leave of absence from my company," he said. "I want to learn how to be Emma's father before I lose the chance." Rose and Emma exchanged a look, and for the first time since he'd met them, Marcus saw hope flicker in both their eyes. But as Rose's coughing fit worsened, Marcus realized that time was a luxury they might not have. Marcus arrived at Emma's school at 3:15 p.m. sharp, sitting in his Tesla among a sea of beat-up minivans and working parents who looked nothing like the polished executives from his usual world. He had never felt more out of place or more determined to belong. Emma emerged from the building walking slowly, her small backpack looking enormous on her tiny frame. But when she spotted his car, her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" she called, running toward him with the pure joy that only children possess. "You really came." "And I said I would," Marcus replied, lifting her into a hug that felt more valuable than any business deal he had ever closed. As they drove back to Rose's apartment, Emma chatted about her day with the enthusiasm of someone who finally had a parent to share it with. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm the best reader in second grade, and Tommy Morrison said his dad might take him to Disneyland, and Jessica Chen brought cupcakes for her birthday, but I couldn't have one because we have to save money for Grandma's medicine." Each casual revelation was like a knife to Marcus's heart. His daughter was brilliant, social and generous, but she was also 7 years old and worried about medical bills. When they reached the apartment, Rose was waiting with obvious concern. "Emma, baby, we need to talk," she said, her voice more strained than usual. Marcus noticed immediately that Rose looked worse than she had the day before. Her lips had a bluish tint, and she was leaning heavily on the doorframe. "The doctor called," Rose continued, struggling to catch her breath. "My tests came back and they want me to go to the hospital tonight." Emma's small hand slipped into Marcus's, and he felt her whole body tense with fear. "Are you going to be okay, Grandma?" Rose's smile was brave but fragile. "I'm going to try, sweetheart, but I need to know that you're going to be safe while I'm gone." The weight of the moment settled on Marcus's shoulders like a mantle of responsibility he had never worn before. Emma needed him. Not his money, not his connections, but him present and committed and steady in a way he had never been for anyone. "Emma can stay with me," he said, the words coming out more confident than he felt. "For as long as she needs to." "At your big house?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "If you want to," Marcus replied, "we can set up a room just for you and visit Grandma Rose every day until she's better." Rose's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been so scared of what would happen to her if—" "Nothing is going to happen to you," Marcus said firmly, though he could see how sick Rose really was. "I'm going to get you the best doctors, the best treatment. Emma needs her grandma." But as they packed Emma's few belongings, clothes that had been carefully mended, toys that had been loved to the point of falling apart, and her collection of crayon drawings, Marcus realized that the real test of his commitment was just beginning. Taking care of a child wasn't just about providing for them. It was about showing up every single day, even when you didn't know what you were doing, especially when you were scared of failing them. Emma stood in the marble foyer of Marcus's mansion, her small suitcase looking impossibly tiny in the vast space. For the first time since Marcus had met her, she seemed overwhelmed, her usual confidence replaced by the uncertainty of a child in an alien world. "It's so big," she whispered, her voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. "Do you live here all by yourself?" "I used to," Marcus replied, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "But now you're here, so I won't be alone anymore." As he showed Emma through the house, past the formal dining room that had never hosted a family meal, the pristine kitchen that rarely saw more than takeout containers, and the living room with furniture too expensive to actually live on, Marcus began to see his life through her eyes. Everything was beautiful, but nothing was warm. Everything was perfect, but nothing felt like home. "Can I really stay in any room I want?" Emma asked, peeking into the guest suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. "Any room except mine," Marcus said with a smile, "but I was thinking maybe we could pick one together and make it special just for you." Emma's face lit up. "With my drawings on the walls and maybe some books?" "As many books as you want," Marcus promised, feeling something shift in his chest. We can go shopping tomorrow and get everything you need." That evening, as Emma sat at the kitchen island eating cereal for dinner, because Marcus realized he had never actually cooked a meal in his gourmet kitchen, she grew quiet and thoughtful. "Daddy," she said finally, "why didn't you come looking for me and Mama?" The question he had been dreading hung in the air between them. Marcus had faced congressional hearings, hostile takeovers, and ruthless competitors, but nothing had prepared him for the honest curiosity in his 7-year-old daughter's eyes. "Because I was scared," he said, choosing truth over comfort. "When your mama told me she was having a baby, I got scared that I wouldn't be good enough, that I would mess everything up. So I ran away instead of staying to find out." "But Mama was scared too," Emma said quietly. "She told Grandma Rose that she was scared of being a mama by herself. Why didn't you stay and be scared together?" The simplicity of her logic was devastating. Marcus had built an empire on calculated risks, but he had been too cowardly to take the most important risk of all, the risk of loving someone completely, of being needed, of possibly failing the people who mattered most. "I should have," he admitted. "I should have stayed and been scared with your mama. I should have been there when you were born, and for your first steps, and your first day of school. I made a terrible mistake, Emma, and I'm sorry." Emma studied him with those wise green eyes that held far too much understanding for her age. "Grandma Rose says everybody makes mistakes, but what matters is what you do after. What do you want me to do after, Emma?" She was quiet for a long moment, swinging her legs from the tall bar stool. Then she reached across the counter and took his hand. "I want you to help me save Grandma Rose," she said simply. "And I want you to promise you won't get scared and run away again, even when being my daddy is hard." Marcus squeezed her small hand, feeling the weight of a promise that would either redeem every selfish choice he had ever made or break his heart trying. "I promise, Emma, I'm not going anywhere. Going." But as they prepared for bed in this mansion that had never housed a family, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that keeping that promise would require him to become someone he had never been before, and he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to change. Marcus Wellington had conquered Silicon Valley, but a 7-year-old's bedtime routine was defeating him completely. "I need water, but not too much water because then I'll have to go potty," Emma explained from her new princess bed, surrounded by shopping bags full of toys that remained largely ignored. "And I need my nightlight, but not the bright one because it hurts my eyes. And I need 3 stories, but they can't be scary stories because then I dream about monsters." It was 10:30 p.m., well past what Marcus had learned was a reasonable bedtime, but every time he thought Emma was settled, she remembered something else she needed. At Wellington Technologies, he managed teams across 3 time zones, but one small child was exposing every gap in his leadership abilities. "And the closet door has to be open just a little bit," Emma continued, "because if it's closed all the way, monsters might be hiding in there, but if it's open too much, they might come out." Marcus adjusted the closet door for the 3rd time, marveling at the precise engineering specifications his daughter required for sleep. In his business life, he appreciated attention to detail, but Emma's nighttime requirements made his most demanding clients look flexible. "And Daddy," Emma continued, her voice growing smaller, "can you check my phone?" Marcus looked confused. "Emma, you don't have a phone." "The house phone," she clarified, pointing to the landline extension he'd had installed in her room. "Sometimes Grandma Rose calls really late when she can't sleep at the hospital, and I want to make sure she's okay." The weight of Emma's worry hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he had been frustrated about bedtime logistics, his daughter had been carrying the anxiety of a sick grandmother on her 7-year-old shoulders. He realized that Emma's elaborate bedtime routine wasn't about control. It was about creating enough tasks to distract herself from fear. "How about this?" Marcus said, settling into the plush armchair beside her bed. "I'll keep my phone right here next to your bed, and if Grandma Rose calls, I'll wake you up immediately. But you need to try to sleep, because Grandma Rose wants you to be healthy and rested." "Do you think she's scared at the hospital all by herself?" Emma asked, her green eyes reflecting fears too big for her age. "Sometimes I get scared here in this big house, even though it's beautiful. It echoes funny." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. In his eagerness to provide Emma with luxury, he hadn't considered that a 7-year-old might find his minimalist mansion isolating rather than impressive. "I think Grandma Rose is the bravest person I've ever met," Marcus said carefully, "but even brave people get scared sometimes. That's why we're going to visit her first thing tomorrow morning." "Before your work meetings?" Emma asked, hope flickering in her voice. "I don't have any work meetings tomorrow," Marcus said, realizing he had completely reorganized his life without consciously deciding to do so, or any day this week. "Right now you and Grandma Rose are my only job." Emma's smile was sleepy but radiant. "Really? But don't you have to make money and be important?" "I have enough money," Marcus said, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "And the most important thing I can be is your daddy." "Will you tell me about Mama?" Emma asked suddenly. "Was she pretty? Did she like ice cream? Did she want me before I was born?" The questions hit Marcus like arrows. "Your Mama was the most beautiful woman I ever met," he said, his voice thick with memory. "She had green eyes just like yours, and she loved strawberry ice cream, and she wanted you more than anything in the world." Then why didn't you want us?" Emma asked with devastating honesty. Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. "I did want you," Marcus said finally. "I wanted you and your mama so much that it scared me. I was afraid I wouldn't be good enough, so instead of staying and learning how to be better, I ran away." But I would have helped you learn," Emma said simply. "Kids are good teachers. We're very patient." Marcus laughed despite his tears. "You're right. You are a very good teacher. You're teaching me right now." "I'm teaching you how to be my daddy," Emma agreed solemnly. "It's an important job." "The most important job I'll ever have," Marcus confirmed. "Now close your eyes and think about something happy." "I'm thinking about when Grandma Rose comes home and we can all have pancakes together," Emma murmured, her breathing growing deeper. As Marcus watched his daughter fall asleep, he realized that everything he thought he knew about success was being rewritten by a child who found happiness in the promise of shared pancakes. But the contentment was shattered by his phone, buzzing with an urgent message from the hospital. "Rose Mitchell requests to see you immediately. Come alone." "It's urgent." Marcus found Rose Mitchell in the cardiac wing at 2 a.m., looking frailer than he had ever seen her. The hospital bed made her seem impossibly small, but her eyes still held that fierce protectiveness he had come to recognize as Emma's inheritance. "Thank you for coming," Rose said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is Emma?" Sleeping," Marcus replied, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair. "She's worried about you. She wanted me to bring you ice chips and her drawing of the brave princess." Rose's smile was tender but heartbreaking. "That child has been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk." "The doctors were honest with me today, Marcus," Rose continued, struggling to sit up straighter. "My heart is failing, and there isn't much time left. Days, maybe a week if I'm very lucky." The words hung in the sterile hospital air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the same helpless rage that had driven him to build his fortune, the fury of a man who had always believed every problem had a solution if you threw enough money at it. "We'll get second opinions," Marcus said immediately. "The best cardiologists in the world. I'll fly in specialists from Mayo Clinic, from Johns Hopkins." Marcus, Rose interrupted gently. I'm 74 years old. My heart has been failing for 2 years. The doctors have been honest. This isn't about money. Sometimes love means accepting what we cannot change. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. Emma doesn't know, does she? She suspects, Rose said, her voice breaking slightly. But there are things you need to know about Emma, about Sarah, before I can't tell you anymore. Rose reached into her bedside table and pulled out a manila envelope, worn soft with age. Sarah left these for you. Letters she wrote but never sent. Pictures of Emma growing up, documents you're going to need. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. The first item was a letter addressed to him in Sarah's familiar handwriting, dated just weeks before Emma was born. Marcus, it began, I know you're scared. I'm terrified too. But I need you to know that I never wanted to trap you or force you into anything. I fell in love with you completely, and when you left, it broke something in me that never healed. But Emma deserves to know her father, even if you don't want to know her. I'm going to love her enough for both of us. She never stopped loving you, Rose whispered, watching Marcus read with tears streaming down his face. Even when she was dying, she made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would make sure Emma found you. Marcus's hands shook as he continued reading Sarah's words. There were pictures of Emma as a baby, as a toddler, school photos with gap-toothed grins, art projects labeled "For Daddy" in crayon letters. Why didn't she contact me directly? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Because she was proud, Rose said simply, and because she was afraid you'd reject Emma the same way you rejected her. She couldn't bear the thought of Emma experiencing that pain. There's something else, Rose continued, her breathing becoming more labored. Sarah was working on her master's degree in social work when she got sick. She wanted to help children in foster care, kids like Emma might become if something happened to both of us. The implications hit Marcus like a freight train. Without Rose, Emma had no one. Despite his biological connection to her, he had no legal rights, no custody arrangements. What do I need to do to adopt her legally? Marcus asked. It's complicated, Rose admitted. Sarah never listed you on Emma's birth certificate because you had already left. Without your legal recognition, Emma becomes a ward of the state when I... She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt his carefully controlled world crumbling. He had money, power, and influence, but bureaucracy and time were enemies he couldn't simply outmaneuver. Rose, he said, gripping her frail hand, I need you to stay alive long enough for me to fix this. Emma needs both of us. Rose's smile was sad, but determined. I'm going to try, Marcus, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that loving Emma might mean fighting for her in ways you never imagined. The family court judge looked exactly like what Marcus had expected. Tired, overworked, and skeptical of rich men who suddenly discovered fatherhood was convenient. Judge Patricia Henley had been hearing custody cases for 20 years, and she had seen every variation of parental neglect and abandonment. Mr. Wellington, Judge Henley said, reviewing the emergency petition Marcus's lawyer had filed, you're asking this court to grant you immediate custody of a child you've known for exactly 12 days, a child whose existence you claim to have been unaware of for 7 years. Your Honor, Marcus began, but Judge Henley held up her hand. I'm not finished. You're also asking us to expedite a paternity test, waive the standard waiting periods, and bypass the usual requirements for home studies and character references. All while the child's legal guardian lies dying in a hospital bed. Marcus felt his lawyer, David Chen, tense beside him. They had known this would be an uphill battle, but hearing it laid out so starkly made the mountain they had to climb look impossibly steep. Your Honor, David interjected. "My client has provided DNA evidence confirming paternity, character references from respected business leaders, and a complete financial disclosure showing his ability to provide for the child." "Mr. Chen," Judge Henley replied, "I don't doubt your client's financial resources. What concerns me is his moral fitness to raise a child he abandoned before she was born. What concerns me is a billionaire who thinks custody can be purchased like a corporate acquisition." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. In the sterile, fluorescent lighting of the family courtroom, surrounded by social workers and legal documents, the magnitude of his failures felt crushing. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Wellington directly," the judge continued. "Why should this court believe that a man who walked away from his pregnant girlfriend 7 years ago is suddenly prepared to be a responsible father?" Marcus stood, feeling the weight of Emma's future hanging on his words. In boardrooms and congressional hearings, he had always known exactly what to say. But this wasn't about stock prices. This was about proving he deserved something he had never been brave enough to fight for. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach, "I can't defend what I did 7 years ago. I was 23, scared, and selfish. When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I convinced myself that walking away was better than staying and failing her." "And what's changed?" Judge Henley asked, her expression unreadable. "I met Emma," Marcus replied simply. "I looked into the eyes of my daughter and realized that I've spent 7 years failing her by not being there. She's brilliant, Your Honor. She's kind and brave and funny, and she's been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk. Mr. Wellington, the state of California doesn't award custody based on guilt or good intentions. We consider the best interests of the child." "I then consider this," Marcus said, feeling desperation rise to the surface. "Emma has been taking care of her dying grandmother while working as a delivery girl to pay for medication. She's 7 years old, Your Honor. She should be worried about homework and playground games, not whether her family can afford rent." "And you believe money solves everything?" Judge Henley asked. "No," Marcus said, thinking about Emma's request for 3 bedtime stories and her worry about late-night phone calls from Rose. "I believe love solves everything, and I love that little girl more than I knew it was possible to love anything." "This court will order an expedited home study," Judge Henley finally announced. "Mr. Wellington, you'll have supervised visitation while Mrs. Mitchell remains hospitalized. We'll reconvene in 72 hours to review the social worker's report." As they left the courthouse, Marcus felt the weight of borrowed time pressing down on him. 72 hours to prove he could be the father Emma deserved, while Rose fought to stay alive long enough to see her granddaughter safe. Marcus found Emma sitting in Rose's hospital room at 6 a.m., reading aloud from a picture book, while Rose dozed fitfully. The scene was so tender, so heartbreakingly domestic, that Marcus felt his chest tighten with love and grief in equal measure. "Daddy," Emma whispered, careful not to wake her grandmother. "I came early because Grandma Rose had a bad night, and I wanted to read her the story about the brave princess." "That's very thoughtful," Marcus said, settling into the chair beside them. "How did you get here so early?" "Mrs. Chen brought me," Emma replied, referring to his housekeeper, who had quietly taken on the role of Emma's caretaker during Marcus's legal meetings. "She said you had important grown-up things to handle, but that Grandma Rose was more important." Marcus felt a rush of gratitude toward the woman who had understood instinctively what Emma needed, without being asked. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice growing smaller, "is Grandma Rose going to die?" The question hung in the sterile hospital air like a prayer and a confession all at once. Marcus looked at his daughter and saw that despite her brave front, Emma had been preparing herself for this loss with the terrible wisdom of a child who had already buried her mother. "Grandma Rose is very sick, sweetheart," Marcus said carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can, But she might die, Emma said, not a question but a statement delivered with heartbreaking matter-of-factness, like Mama did. She might, Marcus admitted, choosing honesty over false comfort. Emma was quiet for a long moment, stroking Rose's hand with the gentleness of someone far older than 7. "Will you still want me if Grandma Rose goes to heaven?" The question shattered something fundamental in Marcus's chest. "Emma, look at me," he said, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "I will always want you. Always. You are my daughter, and I love you more than anything in this world. Even if the judge says I can't live with you?" Emma asked, and Marcus realized that Emma understood exactly how precarious her situation was. "Even then," Marcus promised, "I will fight for you every single day until you're safely home with me." Rose stirred then, her eyes opening slowly. "Marcus," she whispered, "there's something I need to tell you. Something Sarah made me promise to keep secret until—" She gestured weakly toward her failing body. "What is it?" Marcus asked, though he could feel the answer was going to change everything. "Emma," Rose said gently, "could you get Grandma some ice chips from the machine down the hall?" When Emma had left, Rose turned to Marcus with eyes full of secrets and sorrow. "Sarah didn't just have a master's degree in social work, Marcus. She was adopted herself, raised in foster care until she was 16. She made me promise that if anything happened to both of us, Emma would never go into the system." Rose reached under her pillow and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is Sarah's will, Marcus. She named a backup guardian in case I couldn't raise her." Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. A line made his blood run cold. In the event that Rose Mitchell is unable to care for Emma Mitchell, and if Marcus Wellington cannot be located or refuses guardianship, custody shall pass to James and Patricia Morrison. "Who are James and Patricia Morrison?" Marcus asked. "Sarah's old foster parents," Rose whispered. "Good people, but strangers to Emma. They live in Oregon, and they've been calling every day since I was hospitalized, asking about Emma's welfare." The implication hit Marcus like a tsunami. If the court decided he was unfit, if Rose died before he could establish legal custody, Emma would be taken away from everything she knew, sent to live with people she had never met. "They don't know about you," Rose continued. "Sarah never told them Emma's father had been found. They think they're Emma's only option." Marcus felt the walls of his world collapse around him. There was another family out there who believed they were saving Emma from an uncertain future, and who had the law on their side. "Rose," Marcus said, gripping her frail hand, "I need you to hold on just a little longer. I need time to make this right." Rose's smile was peaceful, but heartbreaking. "I've been holding on for Emma since the day she was born, Marcus. But time isn't something I can control anymore." As Emma returned with the ice chips, Marcus realized that saving his daughter was going to require more than love, more than money, and more than good intentions. It was going to require a miracle. Marcus sat in his lawyer's office at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal documents, coffee cups, and the desperate energy of a man running out of time. Rose had taken a turn for the worse. The Morrisons were flying in from Oregon, and the social workers' report had arrived with devastating conclusions. "I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus," David Chen said, setting down the official evaluation. "This isn't good news." Marcus forced himself to read the social worker's assessment, while Mr. A. Wellington appears financially capable of providing for the child. His lack of parenting experience, recent entry into Emma's life, and absence of established routine raise significant concerns about stability. The evaluator recommends extended supervised visitation rather than immediate custody transfer. "They're going to give Emma to the Morrisons," Marcus said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "Not necessarily," David replied, though his tone wasn't encouraging. "But Judge Henley is conservative when it comes to child welfare. She's going to prioritize what looks safest on paper. Marcus laughed bitterly. And what looks safest is sending Emma to live with strangers 3 states away, rather than with her biological father, who spent the last 2 weeks learning to make pancakes and braid hair. The Morrisons have 20 years of foster care experience, David pointed out. They have references, home studies, and a proven track record with children from difficult situations. Emma's situation isn't difficult, Marcus snapped. Emma's situation is that her father was a coward who didn't show up when she needed him, and now she's about to lose the only parent figure she has left. David leaned forward, his expression serious. Then prove to the judge that you're not that coward anymore. Prove that you're the father Emma needs, not just the one she deserves. Marcus stared out the window at the pre-dawn darkness, thinking about Emma, sleeping in the hospital chair beside Rose's bed because she refused to leave her grandmother's side. "What would it take?" Marcus asked suddenly. "What do you mean? What would it take to prove to Judge Henley that I'm serious about being Emma's father? Not just financially, but completely." David was quiet for a moment. "You'd have to show that Emma isn't just an addition to your existing life, but that she's become the center of it. That you understand parenting isn't a part-time job or a board position you can delegate." "What if I sold Wellington Technologies?" The words came out before Marcus had fully processed the thought, but once spoken, they felt completely right. "Marcus," David said carefully, "you've spent a decade building that company. It's worth nearly $2 billion. And Emma is worth more than that," Marcus replied, feeling a certainty he hadn't experienced since the day he decided to start his first tech venture. "I can't be the CEO of a major corporation and the present engaged father Emma needs. Not really. Not the way she deserves. You're talking about walking away from everything you've built." "No," Marcus corrected. "I'm talking about walking toward the most important thing I'll ever build. A family with my daughter." David stared at him for a long moment. "If you're serious about this, we could structure it as a trust for Emma's future, with you stepping down to focus on parenting. It would be a powerful statement to the court." Marcus thought about Emma's drawings, her bedtime worries, her fierce protection of Rose, and her simple question, "Are you going to stay this time, Daddy?" "Draft the papers," Marcus said. "I want to be able to tell Judge Henley tomorrow that Emma Wellington's father isn't just willing to provide for her, he's willing to choose her over everything else." As dawn broke over Los Angeles, Marcus realized that for the first time in his life, success wouldn't be measured in stock prices or market share. It would be measured in bedtime stories, school pickups, and the trust shining in a 7-year-old's eyes. But first, he had to win the fight of his life against people who believed they were saving Emma from him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to discover if love really could conquer everything, including the very system designed to protect children from fathers like he used to be. The courtroom was packed when Marcus entered at 2 p.m., carrying a manila envelope that contained the most important business decision of his life. Emma sat in the front row with Mrs. Chen, her small legs swinging nervously from the chair, wearing the blue dress Rose had helped her pick out just days before. Across the aisle sat James and Patricia Morrison, a kind-looking couple in their 60s who had driven through the night from Oregon, believing they were coming to save a child from an uncertain future. Judge Henley took her seat with the gravity of someone who understood that the decision she was about to make would shape a little girl's entire life. "Mr. Wellington," she began, "I've reviewed the social worker's report, the character references, and the testimony from Mrs. Mitchell's hospital bed. Before I make my ruling, do you have anything to add?" Marcus stood, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Your Honor, yesterday morning I completed the sale of Wellington Technologies. The proceeds, $8 billion, have been placed in an irrevocable trust for Emma's education and future. I'm no longer a CEO, a board member, or an executive of any kind. I'm simply a father who has chosen his daughter over everything else he thought mattered. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Emma's eyes went wide with shock and something that looked like awe. The Morrisons exchanged glances, beginning to understand that this wasn't the abandoning father they had expected to meet. Furthermore, Marcus continued, I've enrolled in parenting classes, hired a full-time nanny to help with the transition, and moved my residence to be within walking distance of Emma's school. I've restructured my entire life around one principle, being the father Emma deserves every single day. Judge Henley studied him with the attention of someone looking for cracks in a carefully constructed facade. Mr. Wellington, this is an extraordinary gesture, but money, even when given up, doesn't make someone a parent. You're absolutely right, Marcus agreed. What makes me a parent is this. I know that Emma checks the closet door 3 times before bed because she's afraid of monsters. I know she saves the strawberry part of her ice cream for last because it was her mother's favorite. I know she pretends to be asleep sometimes just to hear me tell her I love her one more time before I leave her room. Emma's face lit up with recognition and joy. Across the aisle, Patricia Morrison whispered something to her husband, and Marcus could see them beginning to understand that Emma already had the father she needed. I also know, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, that Emma draws pictures of her mama in heaven, and that she's been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk. She deserves a parent who will take care of her for once, who will put her needs first, who will never walk away again no matter how scared I get. Judge Henley was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to the Morrisons. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, would you like to address the court? James Morrison stood, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Your Honor, Patricia and I came here believing we were Emma's only hope. But watching this young man, seeing how that little girl looks at him, Sarah would want Emma to be with her father. We withdraw any claim to custody. Emma jumped from her seat and ran to Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist with the fierce love of a child who had finally found her safe harbor. You really gave up your whole company for me? She whispered. Emma, Marcus said, kneeling down to meet her eyes, that company was just a job. You are my heart. Custody is hereby awarded to Marcus Wellington, Judge Henley announced, her voice carrying a rare note of warmth. Mr. Wellington, don't make me regret this decision. I won't, Your Honor, I promise. 3 hours later, Marcus and Emma sat beside Rose's hospital bed. The older woman was barely conscious, but when Emma took her hand and whispered, Grandma Rose, I get to stay with Daddy forever, Rose squeezed her granddaughter's fingers with what little strength she had left. Sarah would be so proud, Rose whispered, her eyes finding Marcus's face. Take care of our girl. I will, Marcus promised, every day for the rest of my life. That night, as Emma fell asleep in her own bed in her own home, surrounded by pictures of her mother and drawings of their new family, Marcus realized that he had finally learned the difference between success and significance. Success had been about building an empire. Significance was about being the person Emma drew in her pictures when she labeled them my daddy. The man who stayed, who chose love over fear, who proved that sometimes the most important victory is admitting you were wrong and changing everything to make it right. Outside, the Beverly Hills mansions gleamed in the moonlight, monuments to achievement and ambition. But inside this house, a father read bedtime stories to his daughter, and that simple act felt more valuable than any fortune he had ever built. Emma had taught him that love wasn't something you earned through grand gestures or perfect performance. It was something you chose every day, in small moments that added up to a lifetime of showing up for the people who needed you most. And Marcus Wellington, former billionaire CEO, current full-time father, had finally learned how to stay.